Shabbat Shalom. There is a place of quiet potential that called to me from this week's Torah portion. The moment arises amidst a tumult of family struggle. Jacob has been at war with his older twin brother Esau since the womb. Jacob conned Esau out of his birthright and then stole the firstborn blessing. Furious, Esau threatens him, and Jacob flees from home. On the first night, Jacob falls asleep alone in the desert and has an intensely meaningful dream. A ladder is reaching from earth to heaven with angels climbing up and down, and God speaks a blessing of protection to Jacob and to his offspring. Jacob awakens at dawn, awed by this vision, and says aloud to himself, God was in this place, and I didn't even realize it. This moment of sacred pause coincided this year with a particularly fraught Thanksgiving. A slew of articles have addressed the worry many families face this week, anticipating the challenge of how the Israel-Hamas war would impact conversation at holiday gatherings. Jewish Telegraphic Agency has the article, "When Jewish Families Fight Over Israel." Washington Post, "A troubling split at my Thanksgiving table and in the nation." CNN, "The unwelcome topic at this year's Thanksgiving table." Philadelphia Inquirer, "In many Jewish families, generational fractures over Israel and Gaza." And those are just a few. Families addressed this challenge in several ways. Some agreed in advance that there would be no conversation about the war or politics at all. Friends of mine set aside time with the explicit understanding that they would use that time to talk about the war, but there would be no leaking before or afterwards. A colleague's family agreed that in advance of seeing each other, every person would send the group one article that would, in essence, speak for them so they would not speak when they were together. And I know of some who decided it would be better not to gather at all. The Jewish community is having an excruciatingly difficult time talking about the war amongst ourselves. This worries me for lots of reasons. Yes, I am deeply concerned about the fracturing that is happening between Jews and non-Jews. Feelings of betrayal, of being misunderstood, of alienation, and existential loneliness. But somehow more painful and perhaps even more dangerous is the fracturing that is happening within the Jewish community itself. If Jews, part of the same historical family, if Jews, part of the same nuclear and extended families, can't speak to each other in ways that lean inward toward curiosity and growth, toward hearing and healing, then how is it possible for warring people, for historic enemies, to ever communicate in a way that will ultimately lead to peace? I've been thinking a great deal about this challenge as I'm mired in it myself. I certainly don't have all of the answers. But there are two principles that speak to me from Jacob's dream, which Emma chanted beautifully from the scroll today. Both are inspired by God's name. Spelled with 4 Hebrew letters, it's known as the Tetragrammaton, Yud, He, Vav, He. All open sounds, making it impossible to pronounce. Emma chanted Adonai, the term that has been assigned to this ineffable name, which roughly translates to my Lord. But really, that ancient honorific functions as a placeholder. The Jewish name for God is a mystery, even to the most learned and pious. Jewish texts actually have no less than 72 terms for God. Nicknames, really. Shekhinah, Melech, Av HaRachamim, Tzori. These are just a few. Each is a descriptor. Each expresses an aspect of how we might experience what is sacred. A dwelling presence, king, compassionate one, my rock. These nicknames suggest the enormous range of what God can mean to different people. The range of what God can mean to one person. This provides us with the first guideline for opening communication when discussing Israel, though it works for all challenging and complex issues such as identity, religion, even discussing God. And that is to avoid using loaded words that connote different things to different people and instead describe what you mean. Words like colonialism, Zionism, apartheid are unhelpful, and they obstruct productive communication. A friend recently described someone to me as very Zionist. I asked her to explain that in other words, even though I had a sense of what she meant. She appreciated that alert. And then she used other language to express someone who only considered the conflict from the perspective of Israeli injury and suffering. My friend realized that even though she identifies as a Zionist, she was using that term in a way that was pejorative, rather than as a neutral descriptor of an ideology. And to use any word as a slur or an insult is to interrupt honest communication. Words like genocide, Nazi, phrases like ethnic cleansing are worse than unhelpful. They are weapons which can serve to trigger traumatic responses. I have seen Jews hurl the term Nazi at other Jews, at the Israeli government, at policymakers in this country. Nazis are Nazis, and tragically, they still exist today. So if you are talking about David Duke, former member of the Louisiana House of Representatives, use the term Nazi. If you're describing someone who you feel is saying something that threatens Jews, or someone who oppresses other people, then explain what they are doing and the destructive force of their actions. Describe what you mean. Once someone hears the accusation Nazi, it is unlikely they will hear anything else. And using it in that way also dilutes its actual meaning, which we should never do. The witty and insightful Israeli author Etgar Keret, in a 2016 New York Times op-ed that still resonates today, expresses his discomfort with the terms pro-Israel, anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian, anti-Palestinian. He explains, for example, that he loves his wife, but that doesn't make him pro-wife, especially when she's unjustly berating him. It's the same with how he is not anti-neighbor or anti-dog, even though he has a challenging relationship with someone in his building who doesn't clean up after her pets. Keret believes that this kind of reductive, oversimplified language reinforces the kind of unequivocal support we have for sports teams, making an earnest exploration of specifics and nuance impossible. He writes, "The anti or pro appeal aims to invalidate any discussion of tiresome issues like occupation, coexistence, or a two-state solution, replacing them with a simple binary model, us versus them." The other communication principle, inspired from God's name, is derived from its meaning. The Tetragrammaton is related to the Hebrew root meaning to be or to exist. It begins with a yud, commonly an indicator of a future tense verb. It has a vav in the middle, suggesting present tense, and it ends with he, typical for a past tense verb. Together, this unutterable name conveys that God is one who was, who is, and who will be. In other words, a constant, eternal presence. One who doesn't leave us, no matter what we are saying or how we are acting. Can we be that for each other? Can we bring that part of godliness within ourselves to each other? Somehow, even and especially with people that we love and respect most, when we talk about Israel, we instinctively repel away from each other instead of leaning in and really hearing one another. If we come to the conversation with the goal of proving a point, then it isn't really a conversation at all. It's a debate, which only serves to frustrate and to fracture, which leads us to the question of what are we expecting from the conversation in the first place? It's funny. Sometimes I feel like the reason for the conversation, people assume, is to figure everything out. Well, the people that I have been hearing from who are most knowledgeable about the intricacies of this conflict, scholars, diplomats, ethical philosophers, military and legal experts, they are the ones who are openly expressing confusion and uncertainty about facts and about solutions. Now, that might not be reassuring, but it is certainly refreshingly honest. I'm always surprised when passionate but ordinary people come at me with clear and emphatic beliefs and press me on what stand I take. Ultimately, which team am I rooting for? I wouldn't provide someone with dental care since I wasn't schooled in that field. And I feel just as unqualified to provide solutions to this tangled, multi-dimensional, centuries-old conflict. I don't think that it is our job as friends and relatives to figure this out. What we can provide for each other, especially right now, in this very raw moment, is a validation of the feelings that we share, grief, fear, sorrow, and a faith in the relationships that we share. Trust in each other. Imagine if we sat with another person and agreed to only speak in I statements, promised not to interrupt and not to respond, just to listen, and committed to staying in the room no matter what. God was, God is, and God will be. And we carry God within us. If we can bring a loving and consistent sacred presence to one another, if we can give each other the space and provide the patience so that we can struggle to express what it is we mean and not rely on sound bites or slogans, there may be a way forward for us all. Certainly, there will be a way for us to move closer together. Ken Yehi Ratzon. May this be God's will. May this be our mission.